The massive space station floated silently in the darkness between two solar systems. It was called the Galactic Academy, and it was the most important school in known space. Students from dozens of different alien worlds came here to learn about science, technology, and how to work together. The station was so big that it had its own artificial gravity and weather systems inside. Kira walked slowly through the long metal corridors, her footsteps echoing softly. She was different from the other students hurrying past her. Her skin was pale blue, almost white, and strange markings covered her arms and face. These markings usually glowed with soft light, but today they were dark and dim. She kept her head down and tried not to look at the other students. She was Zephyrian, a member of one of the most advanced alien races in the galaxy. Her people were famous for being able to read minds and control technology with just their thoughts. They were considered very smart and powerful. But Kira was not like other Zephyrians. She could not read minds. She could not make machines work with her thoughts. To her own people, she was worthless. The academy cafeteria was huge with tables that could seat thousands of students. Different species sat in their own groups. The tall, gray Andromedans sat at one section, their long fingers moving gracefully as they ate. The small furry Kellans chattered loudly at another table, their big eyes blinking rapidly. The humans sat together near the windows, laughing and talking about their homeworlds far away. Kira found her usual table in the far corner of the room. It was small and partially hidden behind a support beam. She had been eating alone here for 3 months now, ever since she arrived at the academy. No one ever sat with her. No one ever even looked at her unless they had to. She opened her food container and stared at the strange mix of nutrients inside. The academy tried to provide food that all species could eat, but it never tasted like anything from home. Not that she missed home very much. Her family had been happy to send her away to this school. They said it was an honor, but Kira knew the truth. They were embarrassed by her dot at the Zephyrian table across the room. 5 students from her homeworld sat together. They were all gifted with strong mental powers. Kira could see them sometimes moving objects with their minds or having silent conversations through telepathy. Their leader was named Vex, a tall Zephyrian with bright purple markings that showed his high social status. He had made it clear from the first day that Kira was not welcome at their table. "The broken one sits alone again," Vex had said loudly on her second day, making sure other students could hear. "How sad that our people must send their failures here to embarrass us." Kira had pretended not to hear, but her markings had gone completely dark with shame. Since then, she tried to stay as far away from the other Zephyrians as possible. Jake Martinez finished his engineering class and headed toward the cafeteria. He was tired after working on complex engine designs all morning. Jake was human, from a small colony world on the edge of human space. His family were miners who had worked hard to send him to the academy. He was the first person from his world to ever attend such a famous school. As he entered the cafeteria, Jake looked around at all the different alien students. Even after 2 weeks at the academy, he still found it amazing to see so many different species in one place. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that he had to remind himself not to stare. His eyes stopped on a small figure sitting alone in the corner. It was the blue-skinned girl he had noticed before. She was always by herself, always quiet. Jake had seen her in a few of his classes, but she never spoke unless a teacher asked her a direct question. Even then, her voice was so soft that sometimes people had to ask her to repeat herself. Jake got his food and looked toward the table where other human students were sitting. They were talking excitedly about a sports game from Earth. Jake started walking toward them, but something made him stop. He looked back at the girl in the corner. She was eating slowly, staring down at her food like it was the most interesting thing in the universe. Something about her reminded Jake of himself when he first arrived at his colony school. He had been the new kid, the one who did not fit in with the others. He remembered how lonely those first few weeks had been, without really thinking about it. Jake changed direction and walked toward the corner table. As he got closer, he could see the girl more clearly. She had large violet eyes and delicate features. The markings on her skin were beautiful, like artwork, but they were very dim. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes went wide with surprise. "Hi," Jake said simply. "Mind if I sit here?" The girl stared at him for a long moment. She looked around the cafeteria as if checking to see if this was some kind of joke. Other students at nearby tables had noticed what was happening and were starting to whisper to each other. You may sit," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She had a strange accent that made her words sound musical. Jake sat down across from her and opened his food container. "I'm Jake," he said. "Jake Martinez." "Kira," she replied, still looking at him with confusion. "Why are you sitting here?" "The table looked empty," Jake said with a small smile. "Plus, I saw you in Professor Allen's physics class. You seem to understand the quantum mechanics stuff better than most of us." Kira's eyes widened even more. "You noticed me in class?" "Hard not to," Jake said. "You're the only one who doesn't look completely lost when he starts talking about particle interactions." For the first time since Jake had sat down, Kira's markings flickered slightly brighter. It was just for a moment, but Jake caught it. "I do understand the theories," Kira said quietly. "But understanding and proving are different things for someone like me." "What do you mean, someone like you?" Kira looked down at her food again. "I am Zephyrian, but I cannot do what other Zephyrians do. I cannot touch minds or control technology with thoughts. To my people, I am defective?" Jake felt a surge of anger. At the casual way she called herself defective. "That's stupid," he said. "Just because you can't do one thing doesn't mean you're broken. Humans can't read minds either, but we still manage to build spaceships and solve problems." Kira looked up at him again, and this time her markings stayed a little brighter. "Your people do not expect you to have mental powers." "True," Drake admitted. "But my point is that there are lots of ways to be smart. Maybe you just need to find your own way instead of trying to do things like everyone else." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Jake noticed that other students kept looking at their table and whispering. He did not care. The girl seemed nice, and he was tired of eating alone just as much as she probably was. "Jake," Kira said suddenly, "why are you being kind to me? The other humans ignore me like everyone else does." Jake thought about her question. "I guess because I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong anywhere. When I first got here, I felt pretty lost too." "But you have friends now," Kira pointed out, nodding toward the table of human students. "Some," Jake agreed. "But friendship isn't about how many people sit with you. It's about finding people who see you for who you really are." Kira's markings pulsed brighter, and for the first time since Jake had seen her, she almost smiled. "Would you ... She started, then stopped and looked down again. "Would I what?" "Would you sit here again tomorrow?" she asked, her voice even quieter. Then before Jake grinned. "Sure, same time?" Kira nodded, and her markings glowed just a little bit brighter. Jake arrived at the cafeteria the next day at exactly the same time as before. He looked toward the corner table and saw Kira already sitting there, but this time she was looking toward the entrance instead of down at her food. When she saw him, her markings flickered slightly brighter, and she gave him a small wave. "You came back?" she said as he sat down across from her. "I said I would," Jake replied, unpacking his lunch. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped you would," Kira admitted. "But I thought maybe you would change your mind after thinking about it." Jake looked around the cafeteria. More students were staring at them today than yesterday. He could hear whispers from nearby tables, and some of the looks they were getting were not friendly. At the Zephyrian table, Vex was watching them with obvious displeasure. "Let me guess," Jake said. "People have been talking." Kira nodded sadly. "Some of the other students asked me why a human was sitting with me. They seemed to think it was strange." "Well, they can think whatever they want," Jake said firmly. "I like sitting here. The conversation is better than listening to the guys at the human table argue about which planet has the best food." This made Kira smile a little. "What do you think has the best food?" "Honestly, my mom's cooking back home," Jake said. She makes these amazing bread rolls that smell like heaven when they're baking. What about you? What do you miss from your homeworld? Kira's expression became sad again. I try not to think about home very much. It makes me feel worse. Sorry, Jake said quickly. I didn't mean to make you upset. It is not your fault. Kira said, my family was not sad to see me leave. They were relieved. Jake felt angry again at the way Kira's own people treated her. Their loss, he said simply. Anyone who can't see how smart you are doesn't deserve to have you around. Kira's markings pulsed brighter. You really think I'm smart? Are you kidding? Yesterday in advanced physics, Professor Allen asked that impossible question about quantum tunneling, and everyone just sat there looking confused. But I saw you working out the answer in your notebook. You just didn't raise your hand. I knew the answer, Kira said quietly, but when I try to speak in class, everyone stares at me. It makes my mind go blank. That's just nerves, Jake said. Lots of people get nervous speaking in public. It doesn't mean you don't know the stuff. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Jake noticed that Kira seemed more relaxed today. Her posture was less tense, and her markings stayed at a steady, dim glow instead of being completely dark like yesterday. Jake, Kira said suddenly, may I ask you something? Sure. What is your homeworld like? I have never met a human before coming here. Jake smiled. It's called New Mesa. It's mostly desert and mountains. My family runs a mining operation there. We dig up rare metals that are used in spaceship engines. That sounds interesting, Kira said. Do you miss it? Yeah, I do, Jake admitted. But I also know this is my chance to learn things I could never learn back home. My parents worked really hard to save enough money to send me here. They must be very proud of you, Kira said wistfully. They are. What about your parents? They must be proud that you got accepted to the academy. Kira looked down at her food. They sent me here because they did not know what else to do with me. On my world, children who cannot use mental powers are considered ... broken. The academy was supposed to fix me or at least keep me away from others. Jake felt his anger rising again. That's horrible. You're not broken, Kira. You're just different. Different is the same as broken on Zephyr Prime, Kira said sadly. Our whole society is built around mental abilities. Schools, jobs, even friendships depend on being able to share thoughts. I cannot do any of that. Well, their loss is the Academy's gain, Jake said, and mine too. Kira looked up at him with surprise. Yours? Yeah, I like talking to you. You see things differently than other people? That's valuable. Before Kira could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Jake looked up to see Vex standing there with two other Zephyrian students. Their markings were bright with what Jake was. Learning meant strong emotions in their species. Kira, Vex said, his voice cold. We need to talk. She's eating lunch, Jake said, not moving from his seat. Vex ignored him and continued staring at Kira. You are embarrassing our people by sitting with this human. It looks like you are choosing their company over your own kind. Maybe that's because their own kind treat her like garbage, Jake said, standing up. He was taller than Vex, something that seemed to surprise the Zephyrian. This does not concern you, human, one of the other Zephyrians said. This is a matter for our species to handle. It concerns me when you're bothering my friend, Jake replied firmly. Kira looked shocked at being called his friend. Her markings flickered rapidly, showing her confusion and fear. Friend? Vex laughed coldly. Kira has no friends. She cannot make friends because she cannot share thoughts or emotions properly. She is defective. Stop calling her that, Jake, said his voice getting louder. Other students at nearby tables were starting to pay attention. It is what she is, Vex replied. And now she is making our entire species look bad by begging for attention from aliens. I am not begging for anything, Kira said quietly, but her voice was shaking. Of course you are, Vex continued. You sit here every day hoping someone will notice you because your own people rightfully ignore you. Jake had heard enough. He stepped around the table to stand next to Kira. You know what I think? I think you're jealous. Jealous? Vex looked confused. Yeah, jealous that a human saw something valuable in Kira when you were too stupid to notice it yourself. She's smarter than you give her credit for, and deep down, you know it. Vex's markings flared bright red with anger. You know nothing about our ways, human. I know enough to recognize bullying when I see it, Jake shot back. And I know that treating someone badly because they're different is wrong no matter what species you are. The confrontation was attracting more attention now. Students from several different species had stopped eating to watch what was happening. Jake could see some of the human students at their table looking over with concern. Come on, Vex, one of the other Zephyrians said nervously. Let us go. This is not worth the trouble. But Vex was not ready to back down. He leaned closer to Jake. You think you understand, but you do not. Kira will never be normal. She will always be broken. And eventually you will get tired of her limitations and leave her alone again. You're wrong, Jake said simply. And someday you're going to realize just how wrong you are. Vex stared at him for a long moment, then looked at Kira with disgust. Enjoy your human friend while it lasts, he said coldly. When he discovers what you really are, he will abandon you just like everyone else has. The three Zephyrians walked away, leaving Jake and Kira standing by their table. The cafeteria slowly returned to normal as other students went back to their own conversations. Jake sat back down and looked at Kira. Her markings were completely dark again, and she looked like she might cry. Don't listen to him, Jake said gently. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But what if he is right? Kira whispered. What if you do get tired of me? Jake reached across the table and gently touched her hand. It was the first time he had made physical contact with her, and he could feel how cold her skin was. Kira, look at me, he said softly. When she raised her eyes to meet his, he continued. I'm not going anywhere. Friends don't abandon each other. Just because things get difficult. Friends? Kira repeated quietly, as if testing the word. Yes, friends. Real friends. The kind who stick around even when other people think they shouldn't. Kira's markings began to glow slightly brighter again. I have never had a friend before. Well, you have one now, Jake said with a smile. And I promise you, Vex is wrong about everything. You're not broken, you're not worthless, and you're definitely not alone anymore. For the first time since Jake had met her, Kira smiled a real smile. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and happier than he had ever seen her. Thank you, Jake, she said softly, for being my friend. Thank you for letting me be your friend, Jake replied. Now let's finish our lunch. I want to hear more about those physics theories you've been working on. 3 weeks passed since Jake first sat with Kira in the cafeteria. Their daily lunch meetings had become a routine that both of them looked forward to. Jake discovered that Kira was not only smart but also funny in her own quiet way. She had a different perspective on things that made him think about problems in new ways. I still do not understand why humans find it amusing when someone falls down, Kira said one day, watching a group of students laugh at a comedy video on their tablet. It's not that we like people getting hurt, Jake explained. It's more about the surprise of it. When someone expects one thing to happen but something else happens instead, it creates a funny moment. But the person who fell might be injured or embarrassed, Kira pointed out. You're right, Jake said. When you put it that way, it does sound mean. Maybe human humor is weird? All humor is weird, Kira said thoughtfully. On my world, we share funny thoughts directly through our minds. Physical comedy does not exist because we can feel each other's emotions too strongly. Jake was fascinated by these glimpses into Zephyrian culture. Kira rarely talked about her homeworld, but when she did, it helped him understand why she felt so out of place there. Their friendship was starting to affect other students too. A few humans had begun nodding to Kira when they passed her in the hallways. One girl named Lisa had even asked if she could join their table for lunch, though she only stayed for a few minutes before getting nervous and leaving. She seemed nice, Kira said after Lisa left. She is, Jake agreed. But I think she was worried about what other people would think if they saw her sitting with us. Does it bother you that being my friend makes things harder for you with other humans? Jake looked at her seriously. Kira, being your friend doesn't make anything harder. It makes things better. You're one of the smartest people I know, and you see things that other people miss. Anyone who has a problem with that is someone I don't want to be friends with anyway. Kira's markings glowed brighter, something that happened more often now. Jake had learned to read her emotions through the patterns of light on her skin. Bright, steady glows meant happiness or contentment. Rapid flickering meant nervousness or excitement. Complete darkness meant sadness or fear, but their growing friendship had not gone unnoticed by everyone. Vex and his group of Zephyrian students had become more hostile as the weeks went by. They would make loud comments when Jake and Kira passed them in the corridors, always in the Zephyrian language so that Jake could not understand, but Kira could. What do they say to you? Jake asked one day after they had walked past the Zephyrian table and he had seen Kira's markings dim. Nothing important, Kira said quietly. It's important if it upsets you, Jake insisted. Tell me, Kira sighed. They say that I am bringing shame to our species by acting like a human. They say that I am pretending to be something I am not. That's ridiculous, Jake said angrily. You're not pretending to be anything, you're just being yourself. But maybe they are right, Kira said sadly. Maybe I am trying too hard to fit in with humans because I cannot fit in with my own people. So what if you are? Jake asked. What's wrong with finding people who accept you for who you are? That's what friendship is supposed to be about. Their conversation was interrupted by Professor Allen, their physics teacher, who stopped by their table. Miss Kira, Mr. Martinez, he said in his formal way. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I wanted to discuss the upcoming group project. Jake and Kira looked at each other nervously. Group projects were always difficult for students who didn't fit in with the popular crowds. The project will involve designing a theoretical faster-than-light communication system, Professor Allen continued. Students will be working in teams of 4, and I'm allowing you to choose your own partners. Jake's heart sank. He knew that most students would want to work with people from their own species or with the smartest students in the class. He and Kira would probably end up in a group with whoever was left over. However, Professor Allen continued, I've been observing class participation and homework quality, and I've decided to make an exception. Miss Kira, your theoretical work has been exceptional, even if you struggle with practical demonstrations. Mr. Martinez, your engineering approach to complex problems is exactly what this project needs. I'm assigning you two as partners and asking you to choose 2 additional team members. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. Professor Allen was giving them a chance to pick their own team instead of being stuck with whoever nobody else wanted. Thank you, Professor, Kira said, her markings glowing brightly with surprise and happiness. Don't thank me yet, Professor Allen said with a small smile. This project will be challenging, and it will count for 30% of your final grade. Choose your partners wisely. After he left, Jake and Kira sat in stunned silence for a moment. Did that really just happen? Jake asked. I think so, Kira replied. He said my theoretical work was exceptional. Because it is, Jake said firmly. You understand this stuff better than anyone else in class. You just need to believe in yourself. But who will want to work with us? Kira asked, worried. Most students will want to form groups with people they already know. Jake thought about this problem. They needed 2 more team members, but most students had already formed friend groups that didn't include them. What about asking some of the students who sit alone at lunch? Jake suggested maybe they're in the same situation we are. You mean the outcasts? Kira asked. I mean people who might appreciate being given a chance, Jake corrected, just like we do. Over the next few days, they approached several students who seemed to be on the outside of the popular groups. They found 2 who were interested. Marcus, a quiet human from a farming planet who was brilliant with mathematics, and Zara, a young Andromedan who had been having trouble fitting in because she was much younger than most students. Are you sure you want to work with us? Marcus asked nervously. I heard some people saying that your friend is what? Jake asked, his voice getting dangerously quiet. Nothing, Marcus said quickly. I just meant that some people might not want to work with a mixed species group. Those people are idiots, Zara said bluntly in her high musical voice. I have read Kira's homework papers. She understands quantum mechanics better than students who have been studying it for years. Jake smiled at the young Andromedan. Then we have a team. Their first group meeting was awkward. Marcus was shy and nervous, constantly apologizing for his ideas even when they were good ones. Zara was confident but impatient, wanting to rush through the planning phase. Kira was quiet, afraid to speak up even when she clearly had something important to say. But Jake had learned how to bring out the best in people. He made sure everyone had a chance to share their ideas. He encouraged Marcus when he made good suggestions and helped Zara slow down and think through problems more carefully. Most importantly, he made sure Kira felt comfortable contributing her knowledge. What do you think, Kira? Jake would ask whenever they reached a difficult point. You always have good insights about this kind of thing. Slowly, Kira began to speak up more. Her ideas were often the most creative and innovative ones the group came up with. Marcus started to relax and share his mathematical skills more freely. Zara learned to listen to others before jumping to conclusions. After a week of working together, they had developed a preliminary design for their communication system. It was based on Kira's theoretical work but used Jake's engineering principles to make it practical. Marcus had worked out the complex mathematics needed to prove it could work, and Zara had researched the historical background of similar attempts. This is actually good, Marcus said with surprise as they reviewed their progress. I mean, really good. It's better than good, Zara agreed. This could actually work in real life. Kira's markings were glowing brighter than Jake had ever seen them. Do you really think so? I know so, Jake said confidently. We make a good team. But their success had not gone unnoticed. Vex and his friends had been watching their group meetings with growing anger. They could not stand to see Kira succeeding at anything, especially when it made them look bad by comparison. The confrontation came after their most productive meeting yet. Jake, Kira, Marcus, and Zara were leaving the library when Vex stepped out of the shadows with 4 other Zephyrian students. Well, Vex said coldly. The defective one thinks she can play scientist. Leave us alone, Vex, Jake said firmly. I'm not talking to you, human, Vex replied. I'm talking to the embarrassment to our species who thinks she can succeed where better Zephyrians have failed. Kira is succeeding, Zara said boldly. Her work is brilliant. Her work is meaningless, Vex sneered. She cannot even demonstrate basic Zephyrian abilities. How can she hope to design systems that require advanced mental powers? Because she doesn't need mental powers, Jake said. She has something better. She has intelligence and creativity. You know nothing, Vex said angrily. And you, he pointed at Kira, are living in a fantasy if you think this project will change anything. You are still broken and everyone knows it. Kira's markings went completely dark. Maybe you are right, she whispered. No, Jake said firmly. He's wrong, and you know it. Don't let him make you doubt yourself. Jake found Kira in the observation deck 3 hours later. It was a quiet place where students often went to think, with huge windows that looked out into space. She was sitting on the floor against the wall, staring at the stars. Her markings were still completely dark, and she looked smaller than ever. Hey, Jake said softly, sitting down beside her. Kira did not look at him. You should not be here with me. Why not? Because Vex is right, she whispered. I am broken. I cannot do what other Zephyrians can do. I am just pretending to be something I am not. That's not true, Jake said firmly. You're not pretending to be anything. You're being exactly who you are, and that's somewhat amazing. Amazing, Kira laughed bitterly. I cannot even pass basic Zephyrian technology tests. My own people sent me away because I embarrassed them. How is that amazing? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain what he saw in her. Can I tell you something about where I come from? Kira finally looked at him, curious despite her sadness. On my homeworld, we have these plants called desert roses. They grow in the harshest, driest places where nothing else can survive. Everyone said they were worthless because they couldn't grow where the other flowers grew. But you know what? Those desert roses turned out to be the most valuable plants on the planet because they could do something no other plant could do. They could find water deep underground and survive in places that would kill everything else. I do not understand, Kira said quietly. You're like a desert rose, Kira. You can't do what other Zephyrians can do, but that doesn't make you broken. It makes you different. And sometimes different is exactly what the world needs. Kira's markings flickered slightly, but she still looked doubtful. But I cannot prove that I am useful. Every test, every demonstration, I fail because I cannot use mental powers? What if there was another way? Jake asked. What if we could prove that your way of thinking is just as valuable as their way? How? Jake pulled out his tablet and showed her their group project files. Look at what we've created together. This communication system design is brilliant, and most of it came from your ideas. You found solutions that none of us could see. But it is just theory, Kira said sadly. I cannot make it work in practice like a real Zephyrian could. Who says you need to make it work like a Zephyrian? Jake asked. What if we could make it work like a human? Or like a team of different species working together? Kira looked at him with confusion. What do you mean? Jake's mind was racing with possibilities. He had been thinking about this problem for weeks, ever since he first noticed how Kira struggled with the Academy's testing methods. Everything here was designed for species with mental powers, but that didn't mean it was the only way to do things. All the technology here is made for telepathic species, right? Jake said, that's why you can't use it? But what if we created technology that anyone could use, regardless of their mental abilities? Is that possible? I don't know, Jake admitted, but I think it's worth trying. And I think you're the person who could figure out how to do it. 4. The first time in hours, Kira's markings began to glow slightly. You really think so? I know so. You understand how technology works better than anyone I've met. You just need tools that match your abilities instead of tools that require abilities you don't have. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both looking out at the stars and thinking. Finally, Kira spoke again. If we tried this and it failed, everyone would say it proved that I really am worthless. And if we don't try, you'll spend the rest of your life believing that you are? Jake replied. Which sounds worse to you? Kira considered this carefully. What would we need to do? First, we need to finish our group project. But instead of just designing a theoretical system, we build a working prototype that doesn't require mental powers. To operate, the others will never agree to that, Kira said. It would be much more work and much more risk. Let me worry about Marcus and Zara, Jake said confidently. I think they'll surprise you. The next day, Jake called a group meeting. Marcus and Zara arrived to find Jake and Kira waiting with a new proposal that would completely change their project. You want to build an actual working device? Marcus asked nervously. But that's not what the assignment requires. The assignment says to design a communication system, Jake pointed out. It doesn't say we can't build it too. But if it doesn't work, we'll fail the project, Marcus worried. If it does work, we'll have created something that could change how different species communicate with each other, Zara said thoughtfully. That would be much more impressive than just another theoretical paper. Exactly, Jake said. And Kira has ideas that could make it work in ways that no one has tried before? Marcus looked at Kira nervously. No offense, but you've never actually built anything before. None of us have. That's true, Kira said quietly. But I have been studying the Academy's workshops. I think I understand how to modify existing tools to work without mental interfaces. You've been studying the workshops? Zara asked with surprise. Kira nodded. I spend a lot of time there because no one else goes there. Most students here prefer to use mental powers to control technology. But the workshops have older, manual tools that anyone can use. Why didn't you tell us this before? Jake asked. Because I did not think anyone would be interested, Kira admitted. Manual technology is considered primitive by most species here. Primitive or not, it might be exactly what we need. Jake said excitedly. Show us. That afternoon, Kira led them to the Academy's workshops. It was a huge space filled with machines and tools, but it was almost empty of students. Kira moved through the equipment with confidence that Jake had never seen from her before. These are fabrication units, she explained, pointing to a row of complex machines. They can create almost any component you design, but most students control them telepathically. However, they also have manual interfaces that were installed for emergency use. She showed them how to operate the machines using physical controls and voice commands. It was slower than mental control, but it worked perfectly. This is amazing, Marcus said, watching a machine create a small metal component based on his design. Why doesn't anyone use these manual controls? Because they are considered inferior, Kira said sadly. Only species without mental powers would need to use them. Well, lucky for us, humans don't have mental powers, Jake said with a grin. And neither do Andromedans, right, Zara? Right, Zara agreed. My people use technology, but we control it with our hands and voices, not our minds. So, 3/4 of our team are perfectly suited for this approach, Jake said. And Kira knows more about these systems than anyone else because she's the only one who bothered to learn how they work. Over the next 2 weeks, they worked every day in the workshops. Kira's knowledge of the manual systems combined with Jake's engineering skills, Marcus's mathematical abilities, and Zara's research talents created something none of them could have built alone. Their communication device was different from anything that had been created before. Instead of requiring mental powers to operate, it used a combination of voice commands, touch screens, and visual displays that any species could understand and use. It's not as fast as telepathic systems, Kira explained as she demonstrated the device to her teammates. But it can translate between any 2 languages instantly, and it doesn't require any special abilities to use. This is incredible, Marcus said, watching the device translate his words into Zephyrian, then into Andromedan, then back into human languages. Any species in the galaxy could use this to communicate with any other species. And look at this, Zara added excitedly. It doesn't just translate words. It explains cultural context too, see? When I say something that might be considered rude in human culture, it warns me and suggests a better way to say it. Jake watched Kira as their teammates praised the device. Her markings were glowing brighter than he had ever seen them, and she was smiling with genuine pride and happiness. You did it, Kira, he said softly. You created something amazing. We did it, she corrected. I could never have built this alone. Maybe not, Jake agreed. But it was your ideas that made it possible. Your different way of thinking is exactly what we needed. The day before their presentation, Professor Allen visited their workshop to check on their progress. When he saw their working device, his eyes widened with amazement. This is remarkable, he said, examining the communication system carefully. I've never seen anything like it. It's Kira's design, Jake said proudly. She figured out how to make it work for everyone, not just telepathic species. Professor Allen looked at Kira with new respect. Miss Kira, this could revolutionize interspecies communication. Have you considered submitting this to the Academy's innovation competition? Kira's markings flickered nervously. The innovation competition? It's held every year, Professor Allen explained. Students present their best work to judges from across the galaxy. The winners receive scholarships and job offers from major technology companies. We're not ready for something that big, Kira said quickly, her confidence wavering. Yes, you are, Jake said firmly. This device deserves to be seen by everyone. And you deserve to show the galaxy what you can do. The day of the Academy's innovation competition arrived faster than any of them expected. The main auditorium was packed with students, teachers, and special guests from across the galaxy. Jake could see representatives from major technology companies, government officials from different worlds, and even some famous scientists he recognized from textbooks. Kira stood backstage with her teammates, her markings flickering rapidly with nervousness. She was wearing her best formal clothing, but she still looked tiny compared to the other presenters. I cannot do this, she whispered to Jake. There are too many people out there. Yes, you can, Jake said calmly. Remember what we practiced. Just talk to the judges like you're explaining it to us in the workshop. But what if they ask questions I cannot answer? Then we'll answer them together, Marcus said, surprising everyone with his confidence. That's what teams do. Besides, Zara added with a grin, after what we've built, they're going to be too amazed to ask difficult questions. Their device sat on a cart between them, covered with a cloth. It looked simple compared to some of the other inventions they had seen, but Jake knew that simple could be powerful. The competition had been going on for 2 hours already. They had watched teams present amazing inventions, robots that could think for themselves, weapons that could destroy entire asteroids, and healing devices that could cure diseases instantly. Each presentation received polite applause, but Jake could tell the judges were getting bored. Team 15, the announcer called. Kira of Zephyr Prime, Jake Martinez of New Mesa, Marcus Chun of Terra Nova, and Zara Vel of Andromeda 6. Jake felt his heart beating fast as they walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, making it hard to see the audience, but he could hear hundreds of people shifting in their seats. The judging panel consisted of 5 beings from different species. In the center sat Admiral Torres, a famous human space explorer. To her left was Director Vash, a Zephyrian scientist whose mental powers were legendary. The other judges were equally impressive representatives from the Andromedan Council, the Kellen Trade Federation, and the Neutral Worlds Alliance. Please introduce your project, Admiral Torres said kindly. Kira stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly. Honored judges, we present the Universal Communication Interface, a device that allows any species to communicate clearly with any other species, regardless of their natural abilities. There was murmuring from the audience. Several judges looked skeptical. Communication devices already exist, Director Vash said coldly. What makes yours different? Jake saw Kira's markings dim with fear, and he quickly stepped beside her. Our device is different because it doesn't require telepathic abilities to operate. Anyone can use it. And why would that be useful? Director Vash asked with obvious displeasure. Telepathic communication is superior to primitive manual methods. Because not every species has telepathic abilities, Zara said boldly. And even those that do might want to communicate with species that don't. Show us how it works, Admiral Torres said. Looking more interested, Kira took a deep breath and pulled the cloth off their device. It was smaller than most of the other inventions, about the size of a briefcase, with a clear screen and simple controls that anyone could understand. The Universal Communication Interface uses voice recognition, visual displays, and cultural context analysis to create perfect communication between any 2 beings, Kira explained, her voice growing stronger as she warmed to her subject. She activated the device and spoke into it in her native Zephyrian language. Immediately, her words appeared on the screen in perfect human English, along with explanations of cultural meanings that might be confusing to humans. The judges looked interested now. Admiral Torres leaned forward in her seat. That's impressive, but we've seen translation devices before, the Andromedan judge said. This is more than translation, Marcus said, stepping forward with confidence Jake had never seen from him before. Watch this. He spoke a complex mathematical equation in human terms. The device not only translated into Zephyrian mathematical concepts, but also showed how the same equation would be expressed in Andromedan logic patterns in Kellen trade calculations. It doesn't just translate words, Kira continued, her markings now glowing with excitement. It translates entire ways of thinking. Cultural concepts, emotional expressions, even species-specific humor all become understandable to everyone. Demonstrate with the judges, Admiral Torres suggested, for the next 10 minutes. Kira operated the device while the judges tested it with increasingly complex communications. They spoke in their native languages about technical concepts, emotional ideas, and cultural references that should have been impossible to translate accurately. Every time, the device provided perfect translations along with helpful explanations that made everything clear to everyone else. Director Vash, who had been skeptical from the beginning, finally looked impressed. How does it work without telepathic controls? The interface uses voice commands, touch screens, and visual recognition, Jake explained. Anyone with basic senses can operate it fully, but surely the processing speed is much slower than telepathic systems, Director Vash pressed. Actually, it's faster, Zara said with a smile, because it doesn't require the mental energy that telepathic communication uses. People can communicate for longer periods without getting tired. The judges exchanged glances that Jake couldn't interpret. Admiral Torres whispered something to the other judges, then turned back to the team. This is very impressive work, she said. But I have to ask, how did 4 students working in a basic workshop create something that major technology companies have been trying to develop for decades? Jake looked at his teammates, then at Kira. Her markings were glowing brighter than he had ever seen them, and she was standing taller than usual. Because we approached the problem differently, Kira said clearly. Most communication technology is designed by telepathic species for telepathic species. We designed ours from the perspective of someone who has never had mental powers. Sometimes the best solutions come from people who see problems in a completely different way, Jake added. And sometimes, Marcus said, surprising everyone again. With his boldness, being different is exactly what the galaxy needs. The judges deliberated for what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes. When they returned, Admiral Torres was carrying a special trophy that Jake recognized from Academy history books. In 20 years of judging this competition, she began, we have seen many impressive inventions. We have seen devices that could change warfare, healing, and space travel. But we have never seen an invention that could change something as fundamental as how different species understand each other. Jake felt his heart racing. Beside him, Kira's markings were pulsing so brightly that other students in the audience were staring. The winner of this year's Academy Innovation Competition is Team 15 for the Universal Communication Interface. The auditorium erupted in applause. Jake turned to hug Kira and was amazed to see tears of joy streaming down her face while her markings created patterns of light he had never seen before. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Jake corrected. This was your idea, your design, your brilliance? As they walked off the stage with their trophy, Jake noticed something that made him smile. In the audience, Vex and the other Zephyrian students sat in stunned silence, their own markings dim with shock and embarrassment. But more importantly, Jake saw students from dozens of different species standing and applauding enthusiastically. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Kira was receiving the recognition she deserved. The celebration continued long into the night. Representatives from technology companies approached them with job offers and research partnerships. Government officials wanted to discuss using their device for diplomatic communications. Scientists wanted to study how they had solved problems that had stumped experts for years. Through it all, Kira handled the attention with growing confidence. She answered questions clearly, explained their methods patiently, and even smiled when reporters asked to take her picture. I cannot believe this is happening, she told Jake during a brief, quiet moment. 6 months ago, I thought I would never amount to anything. 6 months ago, you just hadn't found the right people to believe in you, Jake replied. And you hadn't found the right way to show what you could do. Thank you, Kira said softly, for sitting with me that first day, for being my friend when no one else would, for helping me see that being different could be a strength. Thank you for letting me be your friend, Jake said, and for showing me that the best solutions sometimes come from the most unexpected places. Later that week, Kira received a formal message from the Zephyrian High Council. They had watched the competition broadcast and were offering her a position as a special advisor on interspecies communication. It was a prestigious job that would allow her to return home with honor. What are you going to do? Jake asked when she showed him the message. I'm going to decline, Kira said without hesitation. Really? But this is what you've always wanted, isn't it? To be accepted by your people?